Hey everyone, hey, thanks for coming back to my channel. I'm sorry that I haven't made a video in quite some time. It is really time consuming, and lately I've been really busy with other aspects of life, but I thought I might share with you my what I'm going to do for field target this year, the 2020 season in hunter class. What I'm going to use this year is this gun here. It's a BSA. It's an R10 Mark II in 177 caliber. I picked it up from Pyramid Air a couple of years ago and shot it, and it's really an accurate gun. I'm very well pleased with it. On top of it this year, I'm going to use a Falcon. It's a first focal plane 5x30 scope, and for a wheel, I got one of the DMPC3D.com wheels for it. Jody now makes these for the Falcon scopes, so if you've got a Falcon scope and you need a wheel, definitely reach out to him for one. So what I'm going to show today is how I get I'm getting the scope and ranging and everything all set up. Okay, so the first step that I took in getting the wheel mounted correctly to the scope so that I had enough rotational distance in this was I took the gun out with the scope mounted, ranged the gun, or the scope I should say, at 55 yards. Then there's a screw in the side of the turret knob, and I took the knob off, mounted it to the wheel, then ranged out to 55 yards, right in there. Then I mounted the wheel, and you can see that screw is right there. And then I slid that on and then tied it down and had it ranged at 55 yards. Then I'm able to use the full rotation of the scope. Now you'll notice that I got various yardage markings on there, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth. And then I skip over some. There's 20, but then I go all the way up to 25, and then 30, 33, 35, 38, 42, 48. And these are, I've already determined, points of impact for this gun so that I can quickly look at this and then go to my range card. And I'll show you the setup that I'm doing on my range card. But in doing this, this allows me to quickly and visually check my ranges. This is white electrical tape, is what that is. I could pick that up at the Home Depot. I think it was $3 a roll or something like that. Not bad. And then I just used the black felt tip, super fine tip pin, and marked those lines across there and then numbered them. Okay, as I said previously, I went out and I ranged the scope. I've gone through a lot of steps. I've determined my points of impact at distances, and I'll show you how I did that, and also marked the wheel to gather a starting point. I say a starting point because I'm going to go back and I need to confirm that these marks are correct. I mean, you would think that once you've marked it, you could rely on that distance being there every time, but really, can you? Because when you go out and you set your target at a set distance, let's say, like for instance, this is on 25 yards. So I've got a target out there at 25 yards, and I move the scope wheel until it comes in nice and sharp, and I mark that 25 yards. But can I go back and can I rely on that? Can I go back out there and have a target at 25 yards, not to my knowledge, but just out there at 25 yards, and know that when I set this on there, it's at 25 yards? That's part of the game, if you will, of shooting field target, is being able to range and know that these marks that you put on here are reliable. That's a big key to ranging and sighting in your targets, is knowing that this is actually what those numbers are. And I'll show you how I do that. So I'm gonna take the gun outside. It's too windy today to do any shooting. I don't really need to do any shooting to use this as a demonstration. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to go out there and show you the process at which I go out there and I double check myself on these numbers. And having done this before, it can be somewhat frustrating because you just know you're there and you're not. You're off by more than just a few yards. But let's go out there and I'll kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about so you can see the steps that I'm taking. Okay, so please forgive me for any of the background noise. It is windy today. There's a lot of ambient noise around, but I'll show you for these demonstration purposes. So what I've done is I've taken a tape measure and I've run it from where the forward part of the barrel will be all the way out to the end of the property out there to 55 yards. So in this step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to confirm the distances that I marked on that wheel as true and accurate as possible. And what I plan on doing is using this target, and I even use this target to shoot at because of the small squares. It really does help define the distance. If I'm ranging based on information on the wheel, the yardage that is on the wheel, you can discern, I think, a lot better using something that is has the smaller marks on it, that rather than use just a random target, say a bullseye type target. So I like this one. I'm sure you can probably find something else. You can use a test pattern. Anything with small, minute marks on it, so that letters, numbers, anything that you can actually focus in on and fine tune your scope distances. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this target here and I'm going to just randomly sit it out there at a distance somewhere, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to confirm that distance on the scope wheel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a target, I'm going to sit it out there at a random distance and come back and range it with the scope. Okay, so what I've got is I get it ranged about 17 yards. So 17 yards would be 51 feet. Oops, camera got away from me. So that's 51 feet. Let's go here and see what that distance is on the tape measure. This would be like shooting a near target. So 51 feet. Okay, so you can see, man, I'm within just a few inches. So that worked out real well. So I have double checked. I am confident now when I use that tape that my target will be at 17 yards. So now let's set a further target out. So for the long distance, the wind's kind of blowing around my tape, but I think I got it mostly straightened up. For the long distance, I'm going to go out there and put the target down again, and I'm going to check it with the longer range. Okay, so actually the wind's kind of blown my tape around a little bit, but that's not going to have that much of an effect. A little crooked right out there, but I think it'll be fine. Randomly set it out there. Now we'll go through and look and see. First of all, let's get a range on this. So according to the scope, looks like about right at 42 yards. Okay, so let's go in here and let's see what this works out to be. Say wind kind of put my stool there. Kind of move the tape around a little bit, but shouldn't have much of an effect. Now the key to this is to be fair to yourself, not to. And you could cheat, but you're only cheating yourself. Counting your steps, glancing. You know, there's things you can do, but to make this reality, you want to do this randomly. Okay, so let's see where we are. So it looks like what we got here. Okay, it's 126 feet. So that is what 126 divided by 3 is 40. It's 42 yards. So you can see that there's a combination of several things that come into play here. One, I think the Falcon scope is ideal at being able to do this. I'm really anxious to give it a try. It's going to be a new scope that I've tried this year. But equally important is being able to fine-tune on the tape. And I spent quite some time working on that tape, ranging, and again, using that target. I'll explain how I did it. Okay, so that's how I set up and determine what my ranges actually are. Now, for a beginner, somebody just getting into 100 field target, there's a lot of questions. I've helped a lot of people get started, and the key is, the first thing you have to do is determine what your zero is. Now, the way I determine my zero is I chronographed, shot over the chroning, the gun, and determined the speed. And with that information, I was able to input the data about the gun, about the pellet, about the scope, all this information in the chair gun. If you open chair gun and look at it, you'll see it. And determine my zero by using the zenith. The zenith is the very peak of the shot. And that's going to give you the flattest trajectory, particularly in field target. It's a good idea to start with that. And I'm sure there are a number of other ways and a number of other programs you can use. I'm not saying this is the only way. This is the way that I do it. So I determined my zero is 30 yards. And from that, because we shoot from 10 to 55 yards in field target, determine what my holdovers should be was I took my target, I'd take one like this, and I would go out and I would shoot, let's say at this one, and using this as my aim point, and then upon impact, it's going to hit somewhere down here. So I would take and again visualize my crosshairs here and see how many points or marks down, hash marks down, how many mil dots, if you will, down that point of impact is. Then I would go back up here and I would use that. In this case, I have my range card here. So at 10 yards, it would be 1.5 mil dot. So I would use 1.5 mil dot holdover and aim for this to confirm that point of impact. Then I would do 11, and then 12, and then 13, and so on and so forth. Through 55 yards, I would go out and shoot several times at that to confirm what those holdovers should be. And that's where I've kind of come up with these numbers. From 10 yards, there's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So from 18 to 20 yards, there really wasn't any change in point of impact. That's why I don't have a mark for every one. It'll get clustered, it'll get cluttered up, and you'll have difficulties. It'll be challenging because your marks will be so close together, it'll confuse you. It's best, in my opinion, is if you mark your changes in point of impact. So if you've got one, you got a point of impact at, say, 1 mil dot, you want to mark that. If you've got one at a half mil dot, you want to mark that. You want to mark your mil dot holdovers to correspond with your yardage. Now, granted, when you start getting up into here, there's so little movement that you really can't do that. But there's going to be a broader range of movement. This is just kind of help bracket that range. And speaking of bracketing, a lot of guys will use bracketing to determine the distance, and that would be the width of the cinder block that the targets sit on, which is 8 inches. And you can do some research, you can find this out. And you can actually make a little bracketing marks on your scope. For instance, my range card right here, I have such information. So over here, I have distances that I know that I can verify, like let's say for 30 yards. Okay, so it's it's 7 mil dots, and that's the total width. It's hard to see on that glare, but that's a total of 7 mil dots across. So I can kind of verify that distance. Again, up and down through here. So my range card has various information in it. A couple that are real important to me is to make sure that I close the bolt and that I have my elbows on my knees. 2 things which I have to be reminded of. If I shoot the gun with the bolt open, then it's a miss because it won't fire. You know, I pull the trigger, it clicks, it pulls the bolt forward, and it doesn't shoot the pellet. So it's considered a miss. I was bad about it last year about not closing the bolt. I'd load it and I'd get everything ready, and I'd forget to close the bolt. You know, that sounds like a no-brainer, but I'm sorry it would happen to me. And if you put your elbows on your knees, it also helps steady the gun, keeps it from moving, particularly if you're doing hunter field target, because you're shooting from a bipod. I've got a tripod here, but that's just simply, the only thing I use it for is to literally put the gun on. I do not use it in field target competition. Getting back to this, so I would literally go in and shoot each one all the way out. And then that's what ultimately helps me with setting up my range card and my distances. You can see that I have various yardages on there and what those holdovers are in those brackets, and they correspond to this distance here, which helps me know what the holdover should be. And something I haven't shown you, of course, this being a Falcon scope, one of the things I like about this scope, I want to point out real quick, it's got a very, what I believe you would call a narrow field of focus. And what that means is that it's very sensitive to the differences in the yardage. Some scopes, some of your lesser expensive scopes, you can't discern between 35 and 47 yards or 45 yards or 50 yards. It all looks to be the same. So when you make those marks on your wheel, you really can't tell. So it being able to narrow this way, narrow the field of focus. You know, if you can get within 3 or 4 yards and really discern that distance, then this is going to be more accurate, and this is going to be more accurate. The gun's going to be more accurate. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. That's one of the things I do like about the Falcon, and I've used other brands, and you know they're not bad. I used an Athlon before this, and it's pretty good, but it's one of those that's kind of hard to discern. Again, back to the scope, people have asked me about why I use a first focal plane scope. Something I did not do in the demonstration, and a couple of points here. One, the Falcon scope that I have does not have a 16 power mark on it. It goes from 15 to 20. So 16 power is the maximum magnification you can use in hunter field target. The maximum. So to be within the rules, I can use anything less than 16. I just cannot exceed 16. So there is a 15 yard mark, and or 15 power mark, and that's what I've got it set on. I'll shoot at 15 power. Just again, to be within the limitations of the rules. With a first focal plane scope, if you're familiar with first focal plane, regardless of what your magnification is, the reticle changes with the increase, so that when you're looking at your target, you can become more, it magnifies the detail of the holdover. So what I didn't do out there was I could have turned this thing all the way up to 30 and checked these marks here, but I didn't because I'm going to shoot it on 15. When I made these, this was on 30. What that allowed me to do was to magnify much greater the image that I'm looking at through there so that I could see clearly and definitely exactly how far out where this should be. So by having it on a higher power, the image is bigger, it's sharper, it's more clear, so I could go ahead and mark this and say that is definitely 42 yards. I mean, at 42 yards, it's on 30 power, it just pops. It's very clear. I mean, it comes really into focus very, very well. So that is one of the, in my opinion, that's one of the advantages of a first focal plane scope. I've used them up to 24 power, but again, I really do believe that it does help. Now, some people may say that it doesn't, and well, in my case, I think it does, and I'm the shooter. Okay, so that being said, I'll turn it back down to 15, and so that's within the limits. I know what my holdover is. Based on this, I've made my card, and so this gives me a lot more confidence in the distance because ranging is very important. You've got to be able to determine the range of your target. The kill zones are going to vary, and you need to be able to put the pellet within a certain limitation. Something that is somewhat important, kind of nice, is that each one of these squares are ½ inch. So I know what the Troyer scale is for the distance that I'm shooting. So I'll go out and I'll shoot at a distance, and I'll look at the Troyer scale, and most of the time it's somewhere not necessarily they're all expert, but they're all going to be in the blue column, or some are going to be in the white column. They're going to average somewhere around 30, 35 on the Troyer scale. So that helps me determine how much of a tolerance that I've got whenever I shoot at distances. Of course, I find that much, much more critical at the longer ranges, although for a lot of people, the closer distances are the ones that will come up and bite you because you have really almost no tolerance in those areas because your kill zones can be very small. They can be 3/8 of an inch. And when you're shooting a pellet that's half of that, you have no room for error because if you even split the pellet, the chances are very good you're not going to be able to put enough material in the kill zone to knock it down. So back in review, take your time, make sure that you mark your wheel very closely, and then go back and follow up on it and check your distances. Go back and make sure that those marks you made are as close as accurate as possible. Have a buddy help you. Have him go out there and randomly set them up near and then set them up far. That way, because that's how you're going to shoot in 100 field target anyway. You shoot near to far, and you do in other classes too, but particularly in 100 field target, so that you'll be comfortable with moving this in that direction, and that your accuracy is going to be hopefully in the kill zone. So guys, I hope this has been helpful. That's what I've learned about it. I am by no means a top-notch shooter. I kind of carry my own. I kind of shoot middle of the road. I've finished somewhere, I think, in the middle of the field at the Nationals in 2019. You know, I think I could have done better. Shooting offhand and the kneeling really, man, that really killed me. I'm struggling with that, and I'm working on shooting those two disciplines to become more accurate. But you know, I'm hoping that maybe I've helped a few of the beginners in trying to figure out how do you do this and what is the best way and be competitive, because field target is really a lot of fun, and hunter field target is, in my opinion, the best way to start out in a disciplined form of sport shooting. So until next time, guys, I'll try and stay on the path of field target and doing some more explanations of what I do, when I do it, how I get there with the guns, and maybe I'll do an accuracy test next time and kind of show you how that works out. So anyway, guys, till next time, have fun, enjoy shooting, hoping all your kill zones fall down.